The vellum felt like dead skin under Thomas Thorne's fingers, cold and unnervingly smooth. Outside the reinforced glass of the Beinecke Library, the Yale campus was buried under a silent New England snowfall. But inside the vault, the air felt electric, thick with the smell of ozone and old dust. Thomas was a man of logic, a world-class conservator who believed that every mystery had a rational explanation. Yet the Voynich Manuscript, MS 408, was mocking his very existence. For 600 years, the world's greatest minds, from Alan Turing to modern AI supercomputers, had tried to break its code. They had all failed. The book, written in an elegant looping script that existed nowhere else in human history, remained a silent witness to a forgotten world. As Thomas adjusted his magnifying visor, the ink on page 72 seemed to shimmer. He blinked, rubbing his eyes. It was 2 in the morning. Fatigue was a hallucination's best friend. But then he saw it again. The Rosette's map, a complex circular diagram of strange towers in celestial spheres, was vibrating. A low, rhythmic thrumming began to vibrate through the floorboards, a sound like a distant engine turning over after 1,000 years of rust. Suddenly, the motion sensors in the hallway went dark. The hum grew into a roar in his ears, and the bioluminescent ink on the page began to bleed upward, hovering a fraction of an inch above the calfskin. "Don't touch the light," a voice hissed from the shadows of the stacks. Thomas spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. A woman stepped into the faint glow of his desk lamp. She wore a heavy tactical coat, her eyes sharp and exhausted. He recognized her instantly from the classified briefings he wasn't supposed to have seen. Dr. Elena Vance, the NSA's star cryptographer who had vanished 3 years ago after claiming the manuscript wasn't a book at all, but a countdown. Before Thomas could shout for security, Elena was beside him, her hand gripping his arm with bruising force. She wasn't looking at him, she was staring at the book. The drawings of unidentified plants, flowers with serrated leaves and pulsating roots, were shifting their colors from faded green to a haunting spectral blue. She told him that the carbon-14 date. The smell of incense and ozone mingled in the subterranean chill of the Vatican's secret archives. Thomas held the manuscript to his chest, its warmth now a feverish heat that seeped through his jacket. Elena led the way, her flashlight cutting through a haze of floating dust mists that had settled over centuries of forbidden knowledge. They weren't in the public-facing vaults anymore. They had descended past the documented levels, into the sottoterra, the foundations built upon pagan temples that the church had spent 2,000 years trying to bury. "The Voynich isn't a single book, Thomas," Elena whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of awe and terror. "It's half of a conversation. Rudolph II didn't just buy a cipher, he bought a lock. The key has been sitting under the Pope's feet since the Council of Nicaea." She stopped in front of a wall of rough-hewn volcanic tuff. There was no door, only a circular depression in the stone that perfectly matched the Rosette's diagram on page 57 of the manuscript. Thomas felt the book pulse in his hands, a rhythmic thrumming that aligned with his own heartbeat. As he pressed the open page against the cold stone, the ink didn't just shimmer, it flowed. The blue bioluminescence bled off the vellum and crawled into the cracks of the wall like glowing mercury. With a sound like a tectonic plate shifting, the wall receded, revealing a chamber bathed in a light that shouldn't have existed. Inside, suspended in a vacuum of shimmering glass, was the second volume. Unlike the calfskin of the first, this book was made of a material that looked like woven silver. It didn't contain drawings of plants or stars. It contained schematics of the human nervous system intertwined with integrated circuits. Elena gasped, reaching out but stopping inches from the glass.
This is why the Ouroboros Group is killing for this. The first book is the map of our
The air in the chamber turned to liquid fire as the two manuscripts merged their digital and biological signatures. The laws of gravity seemed to dissolve. Julian Vane's mercenaries were lifted off the ground, their high-tech rifles clattering onto the ancient stone floor, useless against a force that predated the stars. The double helix of glowing ink expanded, spinning faster and faster, until it became a shimmering cyclone of gold and cobalt. "It's not a reset!" Elena screamed over the roar of the atmospheric displacement. She was clinging to a stone pillar, her hair whipping wildly around her face. "Thomas, look at the symbols! It's not erasing us, it's uploading us!" Thomas watched as the symbols began to bleed into the very walls of the Vatican, through the layers of earth and upward toward the surface. He could see through the stone. His vision suddenly tunneled into 1,000 different places at once. He saw a street performer in Paris, a scientist in an Antarctic lab, and a child in a crowded Tokyo subway. Every human mind on Earth was being pinged by the manuscript signal. It was a global synchronization. The Ouroboros Group hadn't realized that the reset wasn't a return to zero, it was an evolution to one. Julian Vane scrambled toward the hovering books, his face twisted in a mask of desperate greed. "It's mine! The throne of the new world is mine!" He reached into the center of the light, but the moment his fingers touched the silver pages, he didn't grasp them. He began to pixelate. His body shattered into 1,000,000,000,000 points of light, his screams silenced as his consciousness was pulled into the manuscript's infinite storage. He wasn't a leader anymore. He was just another data point in a 15th century hard drive. "We have to break the circuit," Thomas realized. He looked at the original vellum manuscript in his hand. It was the anchor, the physical tether that allowed the silver book to broadcast. If the broadcast completed, the individuality of 8 billion people would be merged into a singular, silent consciousness, the order Vane had craved. Thomas looked at the silence of the Roman morning was broken not by a scream, but by a collective gasp that seemed to ripple across the globe. Thomas stood on the steps of the square, watching as a businessman dropped his briefcase, staring at a street cleaner with a look of profound, sudden recognition. There was no telepathy, no magic, just a thin, golden thread of empathy that had been woven into the human DNA by the manuscript's final pulse. Elena stood beside him, her hand trembling as she brushed a layer of white ash from her coat. "We didn't destroy it, Thomas," she whispered, looking at the sunrise. "We just decentralized the server. The book isn't a physical object anymore. It's us." The Ouroboros Group was gone, their leadership digitized into a void they could never control. In the weeks that followed, the world didn't change overnight, but the Voynich effect began to manifest in small, impossible ways. Crime rates in New York plummeted because the impulse to hurt another felt, for the first time, like hurting oneself. In war zones, soldiers laid down their arms, unable to pull triggers against enemies who suddenly felt like kin. Thomas returned to Yale, but not as a conservator. There was nothing left to